esteemed guests, to the Darkstone Dossiers with your host, Anthony Darkstone.
Let's get started on the main show. How do I introduce this lady? I've already mentioned a little bit about her. And I'm biased, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm biased. I mean, I absolutely love her before I've even got chatting to her, okay? We did a little informal chat. And one of the wonderful things about having a guest like this is that she is a natural raconteur. So I may have some problems just trying to keep her quiet for a little bit. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me really, and I mean this sincerely, you can hear it in my voice, a tremendous pleasure to have as my guest today, SarahElla Harlan.
Hello,
Sarah. There
Hello.
you are. Go ahead.
I'm thrilled to be here. To be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for juggling your schedules and everything around and being a wonderful part of the Darkstone Dossiers. Now, where do we start? I mean, there's so much about you that's so fascinating and interesting. I mean, we could be here till Christmas 2028
Yes.
and then have time left over. I think right from the outset, there's one of the people sitting in the gallery who I met, 20-something years ago, and I owe a great deal of gratitude for him teaching me something really wonderful. And, well, you're married to him. And his name is Dan Harlan, right? So most of you won't need any more explanation other than me just mentioning his name. Because together you both do other things jointly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Well, first off, you're in the wonderful state of North Carolina. Yep.
Yeah, born and raised.
Yep. Give us, for those who don't know American geography, a kind of rough notion where that is. And I know it's south of New York, but for other folks, more or less.
Yeah, so East Coast and kind of smack dab in the middle. Even though it's North Carolina, it is considered the South, but I like to think it's kind of right in between, Maine at the top and Florida at the bottom, and North Carolina is kind of smack dab in the middle of this.
Well, that's good. Now, what I'd like to do before we get into some of the things about you is that you've given TED Talks, you've authored or co-authored several books, articles, etc. on magic. The one that springs to mind for me personally is memory arts.
Yes.
Care to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. And actually, I came prepared. I have
wonderful.
A copy of one of them here. So the memory arts is kind of a treatise on mnemonics. Mnemonics, for those of you who may not be familiar, it's tricks that help you remember things, and more importantly, help you recall things. Like if you need to know information, it's an easy way to get that organized and pulled from your brain. And it relies heavily on, at least the mnemonics that I mostly do, rely heavily on visual imagery. And so there's a lot of artwork and throughout. And what the memory arts did that was kind of different, I guess, and set it apart from previous works is that it put together a really easy system for memorizing multiple stacks at the same time. So it teaches through the book mnemonica and Aronson, so Tamarise's stack and Aronson's stack, and you can learn them together, but then also teaches all of the really important foundational principles of mnemonics that you need to be able to use them in your day-to-day life, or if there are other stacks that you want to work with, you can apply what you learned and memorize as many as you'd like.
I think together with that, there is something you've done which is entitled The Three Fundamentals of Mnemonics. Can I ask you to elaborate a little bit on what they are, 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, sure. I don't have copies of those because they're currently available as ebooks. And I love the cover because it's designed to look like the cover of 13 Steps to Mentalism by
Mm-hmm.
Corinda. And so I take a lot of inspiration from that book. It's where I first, I had learned mnemonics as a kid. My dad had taught me. It was how I got through like elementary school and had then kind of set it aside, but then read about it again in Corinda, the Amazing Memory Test. So it kind of is my way to pay homage to what
Oh,
inspired me.
well, mm-hmm.
And each ebook takes you through a different part of those foundational principles that you need to have a really good arsenal of mnemonic techniques to use however you want. It is an ongoing project, which I say with an asterisk, because I went back to school. I'm now working full time. So I got the first two out pretty quickly during COVID when the world was shut down and I could just sit and obsess and come up with things and make all the art and write the stories that go with the art. And I still have plans of finishing that project, but I just really haven't had time. But the first one teaches the memory test, essentially what Corinda teaches, but my spin on it. It is fully illustrated with really vibrant watercolor paintings that I painted myself, and then stories that go along with that, and teaches you how to memorize a list of randomly called out objects and then recall that list in really fun ways. It is one of the most, like, I say basic, but I don't mean that as a bad thing, but like basic memory presentations that's out there. And I love it. It's a lot of fun. So I teach that. And then the second one is numbers. So it's numbers with an M at the front. And the reason I did that is because people really struggle with pronouncing mnemonics. It has an M at the front. And you'll hear people say mnemonics or all different ways of pronouncing it. So one of my life goals has been to help people know how to pronounce the word mnemonic. So I had fun naming my numbers. It's M-N umbers. And that teaches my figure alphabet. So a really easy way to remember numbers.
I remember seeing some. I think pretty much all of us here have been around for a while, and we know the one gun, two shoe, and all that kind of stuff, which is fine, I suppose. But I was chatting with you, and I saw something you did earlier on. Well, earlier on, not today, but a few weeks or a month ago, or something like that, where you came up with this. What I thought, wow, this is just amazing. And we'll talk about that a little bit, where you have words that kind of slot in with a number. And I really, really, well, I've confessed, I love mnemonics. I've used them, kind of, sort of, maybe, not good at it. But this is why, I was absolutely drawn to all the work that you've done. Now, you spoke about the ebook and the other book, Memory Arts. All of that, correct me if I'm wrong, is available on mystictower.com. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, themystictower.com. That "the" is very important.
Okay. What makes you so great at all of this? Frankly, you've put in the work.
Yes.
You have degrees in music. You have degrees in psychology, and as a minor, theater.
Yes.
Now, that I think makes you not only empirically qualified to talk about the subject, but you also, in fact, in your, shall we say, other job, yes, get involved with psychology and teaching and everything else. So it's not just hands-on. You're not someone who just picks up a chisel and a hammer and bangs on it and goes, "Oh, look, I've carved an image." No, you've understood the precision that's needed with the chisel to get to the image. If I can use that analogy. So I think I've had this, you've had this, I'm sure we've all heard it. "Oh yeah, but I just do magic. I don't get involved with mentalism." Fair enough. That's okay. "Yeah, but I'm a mentalist. Do I need mnemonics?" Fair enough. That's okay. My take on it is, and this is mine, and perhaps you'll agree with me, that if you're going to be any kind of a mind magician, mentalist, pick whichever descriptive adjective you want, you really need to understand about psychology.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
You really need to understand about theater.
Hands down.
Because it's
completely agree.
Yeah, there's, not Las Vegas showgirls or Pammy Thompson or other assistants wandering around on the stage and big props or whatever. And I'll use this term, I don't particularly care for it, but I'll use it because everybody knows. If you're a mentalist, my take, feel free to correct me and disagree, is that quite often you're just standing there on a stage. There's not very much going on around you. You have to understand theater. You have to know how to use that stage and the space. Stagecraft, blocking. Well, Anthony, but I just do card magic. Okay, that's cool. But I've used mnemonics to remember things within what's not obviously mentalism. And that literally, to use the old expression, fries people's brains. By that I mean fellow magicians. And of course, for an audience, it's astonishing.
Yeah.
Like, being able to tell somebody the serial number on a $20 bill.
Yeah.
That you've just borrowed. There are, for want of a better word, and I can't think of one, I'll put it in inverted commas, or tricks to remembering the bill you've just seen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not crazy complicated either, at least not with, so figure alphabets have been around a long, long time. And a figure alphabet is what, I don't know why you would want to use anything other than a figure alphabet to remember a serial number. So that's what I'm going to go with. And yeah, they've been around for a long, long time, used for that kind of work. And once you know a figure alphabet, it's really, really simple to use. What I wanted to do different than what others have done in the past hundreds of years of all of these different systems is make a figure alphabet that is inherently easy to use. And just to clarify, a figure alphabet is simply naming a letter for each number. And that way, instead of remembering numbers, you are remembering a series of letters. So what do series of letters make? Words. So then you take that series of letters, you create words, ideally words that are something tangible or something that you can picture and imagine, a bit of a mini story or comic book in your mind. And that's what you're holding on to instead of numbers that don't really have any rhyme or reason for why they're together. They're random. So it gives structure and purpose to something that is otherwise random. So yeah, I wanted to have a system that made that. I think it's silly in a lot of mnemonics in the past. There was a lot of pre-memory work and landing on remembering oh yes, this, let's see, R4 is R because R is the last letter in the word for four. Cool. And having a different rule to remember each letter for each number was just so cumbersome. And you shouldn't have to do extra memory, hard memory, complicated memory for mnemonics. They should make memory easier and more natural. And so that's what I really worked hard on with my system, is to make something that just sticks and makes sense and follows the same rule throughout. And yeah. Right.
You use a key word there, to make it natural. I mean, we hear this word natural so much, and some may agree, some may not agree, and it doesn't matter. Just be natural and stuff like that. That's a whole different topic all on its own. But in the context of which you've used the word natural, what can be more natural than going R is a 4? It's really...
Yeah, because that makes no sense. That's not, there's no logical connection. They had to kind of make this long, convoluted path to get from R to 4 or 4 to R.
Well, even those folks who go, well, yeah, I went into the kitchen for, what are they coming to the kitchen for? Right? I mean, that happens. I've done that. Open the fridge. What the hell did I want? Okay. Yeah. Okay. My excuse for that is that I'm a really old guy. But, it happens to everybody, though. It happens to everybody.
Absolutely. It happens to me all the time. I think people think that I have this naturally really wonderful memory, and that's why this is easy for me. And that is not at all the case. Without systems in place to help me retain information or know what do I need from the grocery store, even, like day-to-day things, I'm very flighty. I am kind of all over the place because I'm always thinking about something and always distracted by, thinking about what's next or going through what problem in my head I'm trying to solve or whatever. So I do not have this like natural great memory.
I think what you're saying, if correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that it's one thing to memorize, and I guess to a greater or lesser degree, we can all do that. But what you're talking about is really a passion of mine. Is the mnemonics. It's this kind of association that happens. As we said before, the word for and the letter R, that sort of thing. Now, that applies to another passion of mine, which is behavioral sciences, which I happen to know that you are also well versed in. And I think if you're doing any kind of magic, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's pick a card and I'll tell you what it is, kind of magic, nothing wrong with it. That's what you're doing. To, shall we say, what's euphemistically called mentalism, then you have to understand the psychology of yourself as the performer, the psychology of the audience you're performing to, be it a corporate event or something a little bit more lighthearted, shall we say, and where that event is taking place. And using mnemonics, how you can remember things during a non-mentalism act. Let's phrase it like that. And this is vital, I think. And, I say this to all my students as well. Remember stuff we talked about, the dollar bill and so on. If you just glance at the last few numbers and the first few letters, it's done. I'll just share a very quick personal story. I did gigging and lecturing in Colorado some years back, and this wonderful guy, he's gone now, came up to me and he said, here's a bunch of dollar bills. And cut a long story short, he had discovered something. I don't know if it was his, but he shared it with me. I don't know if it works for other currency, but I know it works for dollar bills. On dollar bills, particularly the $1 bill, it's not so much the serial number you remember, which is cool, but they have letters of the alphabet. Very few people have bothered to look at that. Actual letters of the alphabet, like a K or a H or a C, and that tells you where that was printed.
Yeah.
Which can be very, very useful to say, okay, so you find one with a K, you ask people, what's the most famous animal in Australia, for example, or you use the K to then do a card effect and end up with a king. So there's this kind of sequential logic to what's happening. So mnemonics, I think, in behavioral sciences, and I think when you and I spoke last, it's the narrative that uses the psychology or the psychology that uses the narrative. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Hands down, I think that storytelling is one of the oldest arts that have been around since the time of the cavemen, and probably long before that as well. I think that storytelling and connection through storytelling is something that is literally kind of implanted in our DNA. And I think it is something of a cheat code to grab people emotionally and pull them in and make connections with your audience and make connections, not just between you and the audience, but also between the magic that they're seeing. And I do think that is such a powerful thing. I did a research study when I was in my undergrad school, which actually wasn't long ago. I went back to school to finish my studies and get these degrees that we talked about. And I had the chance to travel to France. Dan was working for a month in France and surrounding countries. And so I got to go with him. I did a short part of lecture on his longer lecture each night. And part of what I did, I didn't want to just stop studying for the summer. Mm-hmm. So I got a grant to do a research study while I was there so that I could keep doing something towards this final degree. And what I wanted to study was what makes a memorable performance. And so I interviewed from, I think it ended up being like 12 or 13 different countries, professional magicians who had been doing it anywhere from 10 to 40 years, all of them who were in the absolute positions of professionalism, and had been doing this and really had honed their craft and were the best at doing what they did in all different types of magic, mentalism, to children's performances, to street performers, all different types of magicians, and talked to them, interviewed them about what they thought made their performances most memorable. And hands down, they all talked about several emotional connection, personal connection, and storytelling. And most of them made that connection that storytelling is the way to make a personal connection and is the way to tingle people's emotional senses and have them invested. So I definitely think that storytelling and narrative is so important to give yourself a through line, whether it's through your entire show, whether it's through a single routine. And it doesn't always have to be heavy-handed. It's not like you have to say, I'm here today to tell you a story. It could be, if you have a narrative in your mind, you can do an entirely silent act with a story in your mind, yes, and a narrative that you're telling. And if you stay true in that, and that is like the foundation of what you're doing, that will come across. And so it doesn't just heighten the audience's emotional connection, it heightens your emotional, like the performer's emotional connection to what you're performing and what you're putting on stage. I think it's a really sad thing when a mentalist, a magician, any type of performer starts to not be connected to what they're performing. Just this morning, I was at the post office mailing off some things that people purchased on the website. And I was talking to the post office worker, and he said that he recently was on a cruise and went to a magic show. And he loves magic shows. Anytime he can see magic, like, he will take that chance. And he said that it was the worst magic show he's ever been to. And it wasn't that the magician did anything wrong. It just seemed like he did not care. He was just going through the motions. And so I think that, if you have a passion and I think of it as a spark that gets you excited, that is a story you can tell yourself to stay emotionally connected to the story you're telling through your performance, then that really makes a difference. And if you don't have that and you start to become, jaded or complacent, like, your audience is going to know. And it doesn't just hurt that one performance, it hurts their perception of magic as a whole.
Yeah, people have asked, will AI, substitute magicians? And my answer to that is, dude, in some cases it already has. Because, they just methodically go through the motions. I'm not going to name names, but there are, shall we say, fairly well-known people in parts of Vegas that do this. They just go through them. Oh, yeah, it's fine. It's great. People clap and go,
it's always worked for me. It's what's worked for years. I'm just going to keep doing it. Yeah.
I think if you don't have that, this is, as many who've known me for a while will tell you, this is my great passion. This is why I'm so happy to have you on the show, because we share these same passions. If you're not making that connection, dear Eugene was blessings for his memory. He was a lovely friend and a dear mentor to me, not in a formal sense, but he was. And he, I'll just kind of quote a little bit. There's people doing tricks which are tricksters, and that's okay if that's what they want to do. And there are magicians. Is there a difference Well, yes. Well, what is it? Well, the answer is everybody needs to discover that for themselves if you're a performer. Like you were saying, the gentleman from the post office said, "Well, I love magic. I went to the show," and he was bitterly disappointed.
Yeah.
That's a tragedy, not just for the performer he saw, but for our art as a whole.
And I,
People go there, and if you're not creating that emotional link, and as you rightly pointed out, it's a three-way thing: the magic and the performer and the audience, and possibly all three of them at any point in time combined.
and I think too that magicians, mentalists, we carry a heavy weight because we're carrying the reputation of our art on our individual shoulders. So if you go to a bad concert and it was just awful, the singer was off pitch or whatever, you just left and were like, man, that was an awful concert. You don't write off music. You don't say, well, I'm never going to listen to music ever again. That was horrible. But you do hear of people who will go to one magic show and it won't go right. And in their mind, magic is a boring, horrible thing, and they write it off. So I think for that reason, like, we do carry the reputation of our entire profession on our shoulders anytime we step on a stage to do a show, anytime we go to perform to someone, even if it is one-on-one, showing someone a card trick. We are giving them a taste of magic, and their perception of magic is going to be changed either for the better or for the worse based on what we show them. And so it's important, I think, to remember that.
Well, absolutely, 100% correct as far as I'm concerned. I dare say there are a lot of professionals today who would also agree with that concept, because it is a performance art. You need to know what you're doing. You can be the greatest guitar player in the world, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Eric Clapton, you name it. And if you don't tune that guitar right, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. So I think as a performing art, as you rightly pointed out, we magicians are in a situation where we're standing there and we're saying to people, look, there's a part of you that knows this is not reality. But for a moment, set that aside and come join me. If you don't, in my humble view, if you don't say to them, not verbally, come join me and bring that fourth wall and theater down, then they're not going to join you because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
In most pieces of music, from an opera to a heavy metal band or choreography or dancers, most people actually know what's coming next or how it's going to end. It's Margot Fontaine dancing, in Swan Lake. Yeah, we know the swan's going to die in the end, but that doesn't matter, right? With magic, very often, they don't know what's coming next. So you have to be kind of in control, but sometimes let them steer the boat. Does that make sense? Probably not. But yeah. I think I'm being silly to make a serious point here. Of course, having said all of that you've said, and that I've respectfully added to, you have been extraordinarily fortunate in having 24/7, except when he's not there, one of what I consider to be one of the greatest minds in magic.
Yes.
A man who has redefined the meaning of the word boundaries, i.e., they don't exist. He has redefined the meaning of creativity. So you have this wonderful, yes, I know you're husband and wife, but put that to one side. I'm talking purely now as professionals. This wonderful synergy where you can come together and say, no, that's not going to work. What would happen if we put that over there? And what would we did that. So talk to us about that relationship. Yeah, I know. It's a relationship. It's a husband and wife, etc., etc. But I'm talking about two pros working on something or dealing with something or continuing, as you do today, the business of themystictower.com.
Well, it's really wonderful from both a professional standpoint and to like a personal perspective. My daughter once said, I think she summed it up perfectly. She said, Dan is just my mom with a man face. So we really are. I mean, we think alike so well. And I do want to add this. I think a lot of people, I had someone ask me like, oh, were you just like a big Harlan groupie and you got to meet him once and then like y'all hit it off? Dan and I met because he had a ticket to come see one of my lectures. So I did know definitely who Dan was. I followed his work. Speakeasy was literally between, I got Corinda and Speakeasy as like my first adult magic purchase. I did have a magic kit as a kid, but that was purchased for me. And so he had a ticket to come to one of my lectures. This was during COVID. I ended up getting, had to go to the hospital and had to reschedule. And the guy who was hosting the lecture was like, but the Dan Harlan was coming to your lecture and he can't make the reschedule time. And, this is awful. And, I'm so very sorry. I cannot do a lecture from a hospital bed. We'll work this out. And, but then he was really touched by the fact that Dan let him keep the money for the ticket, and said, it's a hard time for everyone. Like, you keep this for your organization. And, I'm sorry, I can't make it. So I reached out to Dan via, I think, Facebook, just to say, hey, I heard that you can't make it. I thought it was so generous of you to, not ask for a refund. I have several other lectures coming up. Let me know what works in your schedule. You can come as my guest. And he ended up sending me, he video called me through Facebook because it was all just through a Facebook message. This was COVID days and I was like literally in my pajamas. And so I like rushed and got ready and video called him back. And I think we talked for 6 hours and just discovered that when it comes to theater and art and performance and magic and all of those things, our thinking is so incredibly aligned. And we ended up, I know this isn't exactly what you asked, but this is a fun story.
Oh,
so
that's
I'll tell
okay.
it
Go
if you'll
ahead.
allow me.
No, that's fine. Please, go ahead.
So one of the things we talked about in that conversation was I felt like everyone was missing an opportunity. We're all performing on Zoom and no one is using Zoom for magic in the way that I think could, to its fullest potential. And I was telling him, and he had the exact same idea. So we put together this idea of a show and ended up selling it kind of as a lecture, and that he would be hosting a lecture. And so we worked on that for several months together. And then we did the show. I was lecturing on mnemonics. He was hosting, and he was being, I don't know that all the ages of your viewers. So I'll just say he was being a jerk and he was being very rude. People were getting really upset in the comments. Like, what is going on with Harlan? Like, why is he treating her this way? What? And finally I got frustrated and just shoved, like I had a little cube that I was using it as an example. And I just shoved it through my camera and he grabbed it and had it. So then we were handing things back and forth. He, by the way, at the time lived in Ohio. It was pretty well known that he was working for Penguin at the P3 Theater in Ohio. I was very much in North Carolina, president of Raleigh Magic Club. So our location was very well known. We had both been doing lots of Zooms and virtual things in our office, our respective offices. And so people knew what our homes looked like. And Dan was very clearly in Ohio. I was very clearly in North Carolina. Long story short, he says, oh, well, you should just come over here. I'm like, no, thanks. I'm not going to do that. He makes a balloon dog to show me it's okay, puts the balloon dog through. And on my screen, a skeleton hand comes through and it's holding a balloon dog that's now inside out. And it has like balloon guts. It's like a balloon skeleton. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. But he convinced me. I put on this like full bodysuit. My dad was a volunteer fireman. So I was wearing my dad's like fireman suit that completely covered my face. And I did. We opened a portal, shining light, and I walked through the portal and onto his screen in Ohio, fully clad. So, of course, and we did this as a lecture. So our audience was magicians. So they're all thinking like, oh, this is really great. By this point, they've caught on to the fact that they did not come to a lecture. They came to a show. And then I take my hood, mask, face covering off, and it is me. And we hang out in Ohio for a bit. And then I walk back through to my office in North Carolina. We go to close the portal. His screen starts shaking. His house is shaking and everything turns black. And so I'm like, all right, I guess I'll continue with the lecture. And he walks in through the back door into my house or in my office and has lost a tooth. His shirt is all tattered. He has forgotten where he is and is very confused. I finally get him reoriented and say, you've got to go home, man. Like, what? You can't be here in North Carolina. Like, and he's like, well, I don't know where my house is. And I was like, well, there's the portal. Walks through the portal and walks back on his black screen. And now he's floating in the vast emptiness, the great vast emptiness, something like that. And my daughter then walks in and was like, did I just hear Dan Harlan? I've always wanted to meet Dan Harlan. She was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 at the time. So I said, well, yeah, he's over there in the vast emptiness. Just walk through that portal. So she walks in and then she's on his screen. He produces a headshot and a Sharpie and signs it for her. They hang out a bit and then she comes back home. And yeah, so that was our first time working together. I think that within this audience, it's safe to say that we were not truly traveling via Zoom from North Carolina to Ohio. It was all a ruse. It was not true. So what that meant was that Dan had to come to North Carolina. And I honestly felt really guilty because, again, I'm president of Raleigh Magic Club. And here I am with Dan Harlan in town. It was COVID, so it's not like we could have all gotten together. Restrictions were lifted enough that it was fine for like him to come in small group kind of traveling like that. I had one Raleigh Magic Club friend who was kind of running our tech behind the scenes because it was very, very even more complicated to pull off than we had anticipated. So we had his help. But other than that, no one could know that he was in North Carolina. But it was around Christmas time and I didn't want him spending Christmas alone. And my parents are very used to me, like finding the people that don't have people to celebrate with, than just saying, oh, 2 people are coming with us to Thanksgiving or whatever. So it's like, this guy's going to come to Christmas with us. So he actually came down and spent Christmas with us and pretty much never left. He would fly back to Ohio for work for a while until he like officially fully moved down here. But I think that story does kind of illustrate the way that we work together. One of the fun things about having, I joke and say, oh yeah, I have a Dan Harlan in my back pocket, is that I can come up with this beautiful idea. I want to do this thing and I won't necessarily know how to do it. And I will say before Dan, like I could have figured it out, but it would have taken a lot of reading, a lot of talking to my other expert friends, a lot of study, a lot of prep, a lot of probably spending money on the wrong tools and equipment and making mistakes. So it's a process. But with Dan, I can go, oh, I want to do this. I want it to look like this. Go. And then he's like, oh yeah, no problem. And he can put it together. At the same time, when he's working on things, he can show it to me and I give really, really honest feedback. And I oh, good. He's nodding. I was like, I think that I think that it's a give and take. He definitely has, like a wealth of knowledge that is just in my mind, unparalleled. Like I'm not even close. And
well,
so
I don't think any of us are really, because to be absolutely honest, open, and about it, to my way of thinking, and indeed many others, he's probably one of the most creative minds of the 20th and 21st century.
Absolutely.
He really is. I really, I mean, I don't know absolute figures, but the cartoon, and that's all I would say, it's available on your website, themystictower.com. And I'm not a card person, and I was gifted that by a dear mutual friend of ours, blessings for his memory, dear Dan Garrett, who I really was a really wonderful family friend, and we hung out together and did all sorts of stuff. And he said, "Here, you're not really a card man, but you'd like this." And I've still got it. I mean, I've used it once or twice, but I've still got it. Now, speaking of this, I'm going to be silly to make a serious point. This dovetail relationship. If you're doing any kind of woodwork, you would know what a dovetail is. It's a wood joint, basically. One thing fits in neatly with the other. By themselves, they're useless. I don't mean you both are useless individuals, but I'm just being silly to make this serious point. You have gone, in my way of thinking, a little bit beyond into this remarkable thing called Magic Con. It's so obvious that no one's ever thought of it before. You've got Comic Con, and someone says, "Yeah, well, you know what, Harry, let's slice the bread up and put it in cellophane and put it on the supermarket shelf." Well, it's obvious, but no one thought of it. And here's this obvious thing, Magic Con. Wow, how cool is that? I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about the beginnings, what you do there, how it comes about, what you've got planned for this year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. MagicCon is like truly my baby, other than my actual children. I had always kind of had this dream of having a magic festival and convention. And that is, I think, what sets MagicCon apart. It is a magic convention for magicians, but it's also a magic festival for the general public. And we just celebrated our 5th MagicCon, but due to the fence post problem and the fact that we scooted up by half a year, it's actually only been 3.5 years of doing MagicCon, and we've done 5 in that 3.5 year window. And each one gets better. I think we learn from each one. We hone our voice to be really clear about what sets it apart and what is different between the convention and the festival, and these being these 2 separate entities that come together and dovetail to make this incredible event. So what I love about it is that you have this convention that goes on for 2 days, 2 full days, but we typically do an evening event the night before and then an event the next day. Kind of like optional events. So the convention is going for 2 days. And then on one of those days, the Saturday, it is a festival. And the space opens up to the general public. So we work with all of our vendors to let them know that, during these times, there will be laymen walking through these halls. So, prepare your vendor space for that. You don't necessarily want to be giving away the secrets and things like that's we're not about exposure by any means. We are about sparking interest in magic and getting people excited and shining light on magic as an incredible art form. So it's really beautiful. And I'm getting kind of sidetracked, but to see a bunch of people from the general public, adults, kids, we do a magic for grandparents class. So we have a full day of free classes for the public. So everything from our youngest class was for kids starting at 3. So 3 to grandparent, great grandparent age, everything in between. And these people will walk through the vendor space, and our vendors have been so incredible to take time to show them magic. And that was one of my favorite things, was seeing them walk through, and everybody is at a different spot learning something. And then I encourage our vendors to also bring things that would be good for a beginner or a general public audience. And sometimes they'll bring things that they wouldn't bring to a normal convention, but they know that they're going to have that Saturday traffic. And so maybe they'll bring some wands for the kids or some easier self-working kind of things for beginner magicians. But then we also have the festival itself. So we have, like I said, classes all day. We have free shows all day for the general public. And then we have different activities going on in the festival. So this last year, we have a local guy that has kind of had like international work as an exotic animal trainer and educator. And so he was there with an alligator or crocodile and an owl and this giant, beautiful yellow boa constrictor. And so we had the animals there. We had this great guy, he's Raleigh Bubble Man, and he makes these giant bubbles outside. And we had the shirts were plain white this year. So we had a tie-dye station. They could tie-dye shirts. And then we had spaces set up for magic. So one of my favorite was the Best the Magician table. And you would have different things like cup and ball, and different things that the magician could show them and the general public had to answer or figure out the trick. And of course they couldn't figure out the trick, but what they walked away with was that prop. So we gave out so much magic to the general public and just get people excited. And then they want to come back and be involved in our local club, but also just support, the next time they see that a magician is in town performing, they're going to want to buy tickets to that show. Because then we also have our big professional show that evening. While all this is happening, we have some of the best magicians in the world coming in and teaching, lecturing and teaching workshops and performing and everything you think of that you have at a magic convention, in this really kind of intimate environment that then at the end of the night, everybody comes together for the stage show. And this year coming up, you would ask, what we're doing.
When is this? Is it September this year?
It's no, we've moved to the spring. So next year will be April 9th and 10th of 2027.
Okay.
And I did think of one other thing that I think is one of the tenets of what we do and why MagicCon is important. So bringing in the best magicians to the heart of North Carolina for Raleigh Magic Club, which is this group of people that I just deeply love and care about. And so finding a way to just bring in these people here for the group of people that we have here. Also, we want others to come in and travel for this convention because it's the convention. Dan and I get to put together our dream convention every year. Who are the people that we want to see? What are the things that we want to learn about? And all of that. So it's bringing in magicians, but it's also highlighting we have some incredible talent in North Carolina. I mean, really professionals that are impacting the entire world of magic, innovation, performance, all of that. So we do our local legend lecture series for the magician attendees of the convention. We also have what I think of as magic adjacent lectures. So this year we had a psychology professor, one of my favorite psychology professors when I was a student.
Right.
And he talked about the perception of magic. So he truly broke it down into specific psychological principles like the Gestalt principles and things like that we understand now as psychology scientists, behavioral scientists. And this is how the brain works. And this is why magic works the way it does, so that we as magicians can understand the real nuts and bolts behind what we're doing and why it works. We also had the former director of the music department, a dear friend of mine. She did vocal health for the performer. So she did a lecture to talk about how to speak loudly and clearly without damaging your voice. And then she did workshops throughout the day for anyone that was a registrant. They could go and work with her one-on-one to work on their speaking voice and how to speak. So many times I have friends and someone that I know that's in this audience that will have a long day of show. And by the end of the day, their voice is going. And so working with people to know, how can I sustain volume for long periods of time without doing damage to our most important instrument, our voice? So it's those things. Just really, truly, we curate everything every year to have a balance of best in the world, best locally, which is best in the world, and then peripheral. It's really exciting.
The idea of bringing the public in on, the third day or whenever you bring them in, not just to watch a magic show, but by definition, the public who want to come and see that part open to them is obviously interested or dragged along by a son or a daughter or nephew or grandchild, whomever, to come to that. So in a way, they're already kind of, hey, look, another silly analogy of mine. Yeah, it's like going to the beach. It doesn't necessarily mean, you have to be a surfing champion or go ride a wave, but, you're watching surfers and whatever, and then they're coming in and talking to you, and you're creating, to my way of thinking, an audience that absolutely discovers a passion. They begin to love something, and they're saying, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
It
changes the energy too and the atmosphere of the space when throughout the day, you'll step out of a lecture and there's people there laughing in the dealer room because they've just seen something. It reminds us why we do what we do. And that mixing of the audience and the performer is a really, really beautiful thing. And you mentioned, people being dragged along. One of my favorite from this year was there was a girl who, like an older sibling, that had been dragged along, and man, she was bitter. She did not want to be there, and she was not afraid to let us know that, like, I am here because my little brothers wanted to come and mom said I had to tag along. By the end of the day, she was actually in the big stage show, was pulled up as one of the volunteers. And she, no one else knew this, but I sat in the back with tears going down my face because she had just the best time. And when it was over in the lobby, she's still like, because we encourage the attendees of the convention, the magician attendees, if you see a layperson, if you see someone from the general public and want to share something with them, please do. And, so she is learning magic with other people. And as they were leaving, she was like, this was so fun. And for me, like that, I get goosebumps thinking about it. I mean, that's why we do what we do.
Exactly. And this little girl grew up and became Luna Shimada. No,
yes.
She's a dear mutual pal of ours. I know. Fun times with Luna and a couple other pals in Vegas, at her home before she moved to the new place now, which she's actually left the Vegas area. I remember when her mom was alive, because I like to cook, and her mom sort of said to me, Diana, come in, do one of the whatever, and then we did, and it's just fun, because that's the joy of it, isn't it? You meet like-minded people. And speaking of like-minded people, I want to take a moment, and I have very good reason for this. Bear with me, please, to talk about another friend who 3 years ago, I can't remember, was a guest on the Darkstone Dossiers. Many, or pretty much everybody will know her name, Suzanne the Magician. Absolutely lovely lady. And we, got close. I don't mean in a platonic way, let me put it like that. And just absolutely lovely. And the reason I'm bringing her up, and if you've not seen it, I urge you to do that. And if you can't, get just with me, and I'll get you the clip. She does amazing, wonderful, unbelievable, you pick your own adjective, cups and balls. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to reveal anything or spoil it. But the point I'm getting to is that during the cups and balls, it's not just look at this, look at that, and that's changed, and this has become that, and which by itself is incredibly skillful. But she draws these people in by a narrative. I'm not going to spoil it. You have to watch it. You have to hear her doing it. And this is a word you and I have used earlier on, narrative. Now,
yes.
I happen to know as indeed I suppose some others do as well, that you and I, yes, of course, and Dan, narrative is one of the key elements that structure it all together. You, in a similar way, use a very fine elderly lady that you share some DNA with. Tell us who she is and how you do that and how it came about.
Yeah, my grandmother, Mama Jenny. So I kind of accidentally stumbled upon what I am now lovingly calling the Mama Jenny show. I was asked to perform for a college event that was for mothers and daughters, or daughters who were close to graduation and mother figures, not necessarily mothers, but like a female role model in their life. And I was asked to do a show for this event. And it was a fancy tea. And at first I said, oh, I really don't have anything ready that's appropriate. I beyond mnemonics, I really like exploring psychology and mental health. And so a lot of my performance pieces can be darker, like a straitjacket escape that talks about like my mental health journey, for example. And I thought, I'm not going to come to this fancy tea and do a straitjacket escape and talk about mental health and psychosis. And I'm also not going to sit there and just do a memory routine for them. So at first I said, no, I don't have anything that fits, but we have great magicians that I can recommend. And she said, well, I really, this is a mother female role model event. We really wanted a female magician. And I am a firm believer that like I am a magician. I don't want to be pigeonholed as I am a female magician. I think it's to some extent insulting. Like I want to stand on my own 2 feet as a magician, regardless of my gender. But
let me jump in there. I'm being so rude and interrupting you and ill-mannered. But it's another thing that's a big bugbear of mine. Where and how many times do you hear this is a male magician? What?
Yeah, you don't.
It's a magician. What?
Yeah.
I don't really care what gender it is. It's a magician. I'm so sorry to jump in.
No,
but I feel very strongly about that.
Yes, I'm right there with you. So but if someone is truly looking for something and looking for representation of a female magician in front of a room full of young women, it was important to me to say yes to that. And I had a couple months and I have a Harlan in my back pocket. So I took the gig and I said, sure, yeah, I will. You know what? It's fine. I'll put together a show. So at first, the intention for this show was literally to be for this one event. And we were going to put together something very simple because, again, I'm working full time. I'm also very involved with Raleigh Magic Club and other like my other duties. And I just thought it'll be, easy things that I can learn quickly. And then I'll tell some kind of story narrative to go with it. And so I can really just focus on me being the show and the moves and whatnot is kind of secondary. And then I started thinking about that who would I want to have tea with if I could sit down and have tea with a role model? And it was my grandmother. And my grandmother is no longer with us. She passed away well over a decade ago. But it just got me thinking about my grandmother. And so I thought, it would be really sweet to include some kind of something about my grandmother, which then kind of snowballed into putting together an entire show that talks about my grandmother. And I talk about how she is the most magical woman I've ever known. And every single thing I talk about my grandmother in this show is 100% true. Now, the magic that I use to share it is obviously not. So, for example, I have, I say, here are her recipe cards. She was most magical in the kitchen. Here are her recipe cards. And I show them and, oh, well, yeah, of course they're blank. My grandmother, she was magic. She didn't need to write her recipes down. And so I've shown that they're all blank. But I am not as magic as my grandmother. I'm not as magical. I have to have mine written down. And then now all the recipe cards are covered in writing. I get to produce a whole pan of wonderful buttermilk biscuits. And It's just this beautiful, wonderful show. And it's all true. My grandmother did not write down these. In fact, when I was trying to put together the buttermilk biscuit recipe to write it down for the show, I called my mom and was like, do you have that recipe? And she was like, well, no, your grandmother never wrote it down, but I know how to make it. Call your sister. I called my sister and she was like, well, I wrote down what she taught me. So I got the recipe from my sister who had written it down. But yeah, she really, truly. So that, yeah. I guess that's that spark I'm talking about, right? Like I get all excited and distracted talking about my grandmother because I loved her so much. And I think she was just such this special person.
Exactly. And that translates to the audience. Because if we're obviously loving what we're doing, and there is passion, there's no other word for it.
Yeah.
You know, Suzanne's talking about this elderly lady she met. You are doing this and put together a whole show about your grandma. So they become drawn in. And this is where the narrative is so important, I think. Pretty much anybody and everybody, I don't, does the cups and balls to a greater or lesser extent. Quite often, I'm sorry to say, to a lesser extent. There are some greats. You can reel off some names, but I won't. But that's why I wanted to bring this, to get your take on it so that people can understand how very important this is. Taking something that it makes sense. Grandma, cooking, recipes, this changes to that. The magic, and I hate to use this word, becomes secondary, but still an integral part of the overall, for want of a better word, the overall vignette, the performance. And this, I think, is where, you know, the difference that I mentioned earlier on, to quote dear Eugene, you know, there's tricksters, and that's fine if that's what they want to do, but it's not for me. And there's magicians. To say, yeah, but you know, I can't do this. No, take what you know and find something that you can attach to it. It doesn't have to be personal. It doesn't even have to be true. But as long as you're wrapped into it, because you said something incredibly important, which every single one of us should remember. Sorry, no pun intended. You don't need mnemonics for it. And that is, we loved stories from the days of cavemen, all the little children, my own DNA. There's people gathering around and sitting around a fire, quite literally, and an older person would speak. And this happens in many, many cultures, Celtic cultures, whatever. There was a drum, all of this. And there is that sense of bringing together all of it. And if you can translate that in some small, meaningful way to a stage or a parlor, then I think whoever's able to do that earns the title of magician. Just coming in and doing, you know, a quick, you know, top shuffle or underpass or whatever, and say, hey, look, your cards jumped to the top. So, but if there's something that happens to it, something that people can go away and relating. And you said something else, which I so totally agree with, and I love you dearly for it. And I mean that in a kind of uncly, fatherly sense, because you know, we've spoken, my son is 44. So, yeah, I mean it in a good way. You mentioned it by saying, yeah, it's this relationship, it's this building where you are making something cohesive, where they no longer are watching a puzzle to be solved, which unfortunately a lot of magic is.
And it helps with, you know, people are always asking about hecklers and things like that. I could not imagine anyone trying to heckle Mama Jenny's show. So weird. Like, I don't think that it completely takes away the power of any kind of, I think there is no power dynamic between me and the audience. I think that's what gets hecklers sometimes. They don't like that power differential or feeling lesser than. And so having a story that It's just me sharing someone I love.
Exactly.
Completely,
You can't heckle that, because I
yeah.
think, and there's quite a few of them sitting in the audience here today. One of them in particular that I absolutely love this man. We're more or less of a similar age. He's slightly older than me, but I've publicly and otherwise always stated he's one of the few people who make me feel like a layperson because of what he does. He doesn't have a great narrative. He doesn't tell a big story. It's just the way in his entire mannerism, his performing persona, he does this. And, I produce shows, I did this, and, I've been to sort of four corners of the planet and lectured and done shows and all that kind of stuff. But still, it's so wonderful to have someone like this gentleman sitting there and you watch him and kind of going, wow. And you're just enthralled. I don't really care how he's doing it. I don't really care. I'm just absolutely in love with what he's doing.
Yeah.
John Rockebaum once said in an article even I wrote about him when I spent time with him in New Orleans, John said to me, look, when you're performing magic, and I put that in the article, by the way, you're like a lover about to woo somebody. You don't go up there in a gruff voice and go, hey, you want to have a date tonight? No, it's soothing, it's calm, it's whatever. Even if you're a comedy magician. One of the great people I met is a really, really good pal of mine. You all know him as well. Michael Finney. Michael has this extraordinary ability to sound like he's doing everything ad lib. I know he's not. He's worked everything out perfectly. So there are people like this that I think we should all study and look at. And thank you for bringing this up. Like I said, I could sit here and I would absolutely love it. Just be joyous talking to you for till Christmas 2027 or longer. But we're looking at the clock, and it's come to that time where I think we need to give, firstly, to say a huge thank you, SarahElla, for making the time to come and share with us. It's been really wonderful, and I hope if people have half enjoyed listening to you as I have, I'd be more than delighted. Just half. Delighted that Dan, who I know is away in Chicago at the moment, also made the time to pop in. Now what I want to do is to take your mics off and jump in and, speak directly to Sarah as you wish, or ask me. Yep. Okay. Yeah, okay, hold
Sorry,
it.
I got so distracted because I switched to gallery and I see Rick and Jules' image.
Yeah. How'd you get in there?
How? I don't know. What?
Oh, there's Dan. Yeah, okay. Well, Dan, we might as well bring you in. You jumped in. Lad, go ahead.
Yeah. I saw that, long ago, and I was like, that's cool. I want to hear from them. How did they do that? That's AI magic, but it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, I do too. It was funny because I looked at it. If you look at Rick and Jules' image, it's me. It's them with me.
Yeah, and current, I think.
In my background and everything. I looked at it and thought, whoa, that person looks just like me. And then realized, oh, wait a minute.
It looks to me like
and I don't want to reveal any huge secrets, but in the latest promo that I'm in Penguin Magic, they AI'd me. And I loved it. I mean, because it's my words. I said them, but under different circumstance. And they changed the background and had me sitting down instead of standing, all that kind of stuff. But it was pretty cool. Like I'm a big proponent of AI used in a good way to help tell the story, to push it forward. And I do want to become an avatar in the future. So, I'm all for it. It looked great.
You're halfway there. It was actually so good that Dan was like, I think I'm partially AI because I don't remember I don't remember that I was ever sitting down. And we figured it out because we zoomed in. He has a bracelet that he always wears. You mentioned Luna Shimada. I had her make him a bracelet and he always wears that. And then our wedding rings are tattooed. And in the image, like he's not wearing, like you can't see a ring, or he had a normal wedding ring on and no bracelet. And so that was how it was so good. That was how we had to figure out that, like, no, you really weren't sitting down. You remembered that correctly.
Yeah. And I want to take a moment just to say, it was mentioned peripherally, but SarahElla is of the same level of conscious thought about our art. That's why we get along so well. And she does have a fascinating foundation because she reads a lot. And one thing that I think is critical is that she reads outside of magic a lot
Yes,
that
sir.
influences
Absolutely critical.
in
Absolutely. Yes.
magic, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
It's
no,
just that,
no. I just,
yeah, you're right. You're
I
right.
just,
Yeah, magicians need to, it'd be one of my acts. I opened with a line from Shakespeare. Well,
yeah.
3 lines from Shakespeare. And that kind of stops a slightly noisy audience.
Sure. And whenever I
Yeah.
have a question on anything, and it's all the time. I mean, I develop new material all the time. And it is a struggle to develop material on your own, and it's one that I understand. But to have a sounding board, to have someone
Mm.
that is on that same level, that is, intelligent enough to have an honest discussion and say this is working or that's not working or what are you trying to do? That's what she brings to the table for sure.
Well, I'm so glad you added that, Dan,
Hmm.
because that is obviously for the both of you a wonderful asset. But it's equally an asset to, as you mentioned earlier on, where and this is my kind of hobby horse. Don't just read magic books. Well, of course you got to read magic books, but that's a given. But read other things, find out about psychology, find out about the universe, find out about something. Because everything everywhere has the seedlings of an interesting script.
Yes.
Everything. Somebody gives me something and says, okay, or for me, I would kind of go, well, I like that. How can I put those words together? And then I figure out what effect to go with it. That's me.
Yeah.
That's how I work rather than the other way around.
Yep. That's 100% the order that I recommend. And going through life with open eyes. Like I feel like, especially with like ready access to the internet and our phones, it's so easy to get lost. You see people walking around and they're looking on their phones, or they're playing a podcast while they're walking, or they're in some way not fully engaged with the world around them. And I think it's so important. And I'm not saying don't listen to podcasts. That's great. That's a great way to get in information, but I think it's really, really important for us every single day to make sure that we are making an effort to be fully engaged with our surroundings and to take in the world and see in 3D and think magically about the day-to-day life that we get to live. This is totally a side point, but it kind of is related.
It is.
Yeah,
it is
well,
really.
my next point might not be, but we'll see. No,
Okay,
I
we'll
think
see.
it is. I think it is. So there's this beautiful quote that I just discovered. I literally learned it so recently. I don't know who it's attributed to. Somebody else said it, like, oh, I heard this said. We often hear people say you only live once, but that is not at all true. We live every single day that we wake up.
Yep.
Every
Agreed.
single day. So we live
Agreed.
thousands of times. We die once.
Yep.
And that has totally shifted literally the way that I drive to work every day. And the way that if I'm walking on, I work at Duke, which is just this beautiful, beautiful campus. If ever you're in North Carolina, go visit the Duke Gardens and go see the chapel. It's incredible. And I try to let myself be immersed in the world around me, because I think that's so important for creativity. When I was putting together my grandmother's show, if I had allowed myself to get distracted by like scrolling or listening to other people talk and not allowing myself to get lost in my own thoughts, I would not have come up with the many beautiful things that I did. The reason that I came up with the things to add to my Mama Jenny show was because I let it sit with me, and I let myself have just a beautiful walk to and from work, thinking, or driving to work. I mean, I do so much thinking. I drive to work. It takes me like an hour to get there, an hour back. And I've come to find that I love that time, because I just sit there and I think through all of these things. And I think we're so busy spending time trying to find input. But, and when we need that dopamine, we've trained ourselves that these little tiny dopamine hits, it is literally an addiction. Input, input, input. And I think as creators, people that want to put into the world instead of just taking from it, it's important that we shut down that pipeline of things being fueled to us.
Absolutely.
And we sit in our
Absolutely.
own thoughts and we just observe the natural world. Or if you go in, the number of times I've been in a store with Dan and he'll like dash down the toy aisle or something because he spotted something. And then I'll find him, he's like, don't you, what about we could use this for this and this, you know? But it's because of constantly thinking and being aware of the environment and giving yourself time.
Well, I think
Hear your own voice.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. We need that own time. And nowadays, as you rightly pointed out, there's so many, for want of a better word, distractions. We need to come back to source, to link with that. I'm going to get a bit esoteric here. That universal consciousness. We say, "Oh, yeah, that's deep, man." So, no, it's not. It's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's magic. That's what we do. We're magicians, you know.
Yeah, Anthony, I just want to jump in because it's part of what SarahElla inspired and what she and I have put together for MagicCon is that we draw from these outside energies that affect what we do because we are trying to connect to everybody in the world. And she never quite got a chance to tell you what we're doing this year.
Oh,
and
yeah.
because you mentioned Luna and we're trying to get
man,
Luna.
Listen, you gotta send this good lady out on a memory course, okay? No, it's not my fault. I mean, I brought up MagicCon, she just forgot. That's it.
But there's so much to talk about. That's the thing.
I know.
This is what's fascinating. I will tell you that normally in magic, people talk about, magicians talk about the nuts and bolts. They talk about the moves. They talk about the physical objects. They're just talking about these little pieces. They never talk about the big structure. We like to think about people who are really, really interested in connecting with an audience. We think big picture. Now, of course, we're concerned about nuts and bolts because it holds it all together. But we'd rather show them something amazing, the creation, what we finished, why it matters, all of that. And we want it to have a purpose. So anyway, that just to hear from SarahElla.
It's good that you said that because an analogy that springs to mind is like any good film director. Yes, the details matter, including what costume the extras are wearing, and if the gun is the right thing, you'd say, well, okay, this is being done in, 1812. No, there aren't any 5-cylinder Colt 45s in 1812. So, little details matter. But having said that, at the end, he's just sitting with the editor in the cutting room, and that's when the whole picture comes out. Nobody gets to see little scenes from a movie. It's a painter. He spends, 3 weeks on one leaf, so that when the finished painting is done, people don't kind of go, oh, wow, look at that cool leaf. That just happens because the painter did that. It's actually there. It's this exchange of energy via that wonderful painting. Yeah. Okay, I think I see a few people up here wanting to chat with you, Sarah.
I want to hear from SarahElla about.
Because I wanted to say what we're doing this year.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We're circus sideshow is the theme of MagicCon this year, and we never. People have asked like, oh, well, what type of convention is it? You have different conventions with different focuses. It's a magic convention. We can learn from everything and everyone, and we can, a mentalist can learn from a close-up card magician, the same way that, we all have things to give. We've talked about that throughout our time together. So it's going to be circus sideshow, and we're moving to a large.
You're hiring any trick writers?
I'm not. No.
Do you have one to recommend? One to recommend that's in the Raleigh area?
Absolutely. Some guy called Darkstone when he was 30 years younger.
Yeah, come on over.
Yeah. Listen, man, I got to get strapped up just sitting in a chair. Never mind. I'm saying earlier, I actually fell off a horse
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago. Not the horse's fault. I was saying I tried doing something without a saddle and then realized, in fact, no, I'm too old for that kind of crap. I need stirrups. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. You were doing
So
circus themes, yes.
yeah, so talking about like big picture, the place that we're moving to is larger. It has more theaters for us to work with, but the main large theater, like convention space, doesn't have a traditional stage. So we're building one, and it's going to be like a 3-ring circus, kind of thrust
Wow.
style. So we'll
Wow.
be kind of all around the stage. We are and I think things will work that we'll be allowed to do this because we're not like hanging from the ceiling, but we will have what feels like the circus tent. I'm just so excited. It's going to be really, really cool. And we're going to have some really great people come out, but that's going to be the feel
Well,
of the
the
whole
thing,
thing.
thing with tents, which sometimes in Europe are called marquees, which are like big tents.
Hmm.
I'd never worked one before, many years ago. J. Scott Berry asked me and my son to come up and said, "Come to Scotland." I said, "Well, who else is there?" And he said, "Oh, Pat Page and Ali Bongo, etc." Yeah, great, two wonderful mentors and friends. Anyway, long story short. They did have a stage for the evening gala show, but throughout the day, there were these huge marquees and there was different shows going on in each one. And I think it was like over the weekend, something like 15,000 people showed up, public, paid a
Yeah.
ticket and all that kind of thing. So yeah, go for it. Make a video and all that kind of stuff for us folks who can't get over for whatever reason. Yeah. Can I jump to some people waiting patiently who want to talk to you, if I may? I think first off, to as is done in all good U.S. parlance, my main man, Mr. John O'Riordan.
Hello, Sarah. Thanks very much for this evening tonight. I find it fascinating. I could listen for hours, and the time has gone so quickly.
Yes.
Um, uh, I think any young magician would really value or gain a great deal by listening to the conversation tonight, because magic is going away. It's just about a trick and learning a trick and whatever. But the background behind it is, we could talk forever. What I wanted to ask you, are you familiar with Tony Bizan? With the talking about creativity. Have you read?
The name is so incredibly familiar. I am certain, I don't know that I've read any things specifically, but I know that I've heard that discussed in like my classes and things like that.
Yeah, with Tony Bazan, he's had several books out. One was called Use Your Head, and it was about mind mapping and creativity. And you reminded me
Yes.
so much about it tonight. And if ever I go to a lecture, even tonight, I'm using mind mapping, all the things you've said tonight. And I'm a person that just goes on pictures and creativity, and people that say they can't take in like in a linear format. The Tony Bazan opened it up for me when I was a young person reading that material. Like Eric DeBona was another person with creative thoughts, and what I think you've done is reinforced tonight, and I'm so grateful for being invited. Thank you, Anthony, for arranging this.
Most welcome, John. Most welcome.
Because and Dan Harlan, I've got every respect for you, sir. For you. I've used cartoon, and cartoon was used in Britain Got Talent here, and it done very
Yep,
well. As
absolutely.
you know. And but I think all young magicians coming to the world of magic, trying to create a sense of wonder with people, would really benefit by conversations. And you're talking about your grandmother and your show. What you have is you're touching people's emotions, and that's what magic is about. When you vanish a coin, it shouldn't be just a trick. It should be the coin has gone somewhere, and we try and create that, and we can't do it without deep thinking about why we do it, how we do it, and things. But I, I'm forever grateful for this evening. I think it's been a real wonderful evening. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the book recommendation. I wrote it down. It will be one of the next things I read.
Use your head, and the right side of the brain is another one that he wrote.
Okay.
It helped me through my career. It's just a wonderful way of opening up when people just can't take things in. And it's all about color and using your imagination and pictures and memory techniques. And so I think what you're doing is wonderful, and thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Earlier on,
And John, excuse me, I'm sorry about that, Anthony. Let me just jump in because John, you brought up a great point about thinking visually. That is what really got me interested in SarahElla's memory techniques. She is the only mnemonist that I have ever encountered that created pictures for memory. Yeah. And her work, makes the whole thing visual. So everything, when you break the symbols, the numbers into the letters, into the words, you don't stop there. You then create a picture, and that picture just locks it in.
Yeah, and also Dan, sorry, I don't want to take over the conversation here, but
that's okay.
It's visualization. When you have nerves and you're performing, it's visualizing how well it will go. And it helps you, and you think in certain colors, the color that would suit you, that should you be successful on tonight when you're doing coins through the table and whatever, that color comes to you. And it's such an important way of visualization and techniques. Maybe so simple, but so important.
Earlier on, I mentioned this particular person in the audience who makes me feel like a layperson. Well, you've just heard him speak, and that's dear John O'Riordan. He's got an MIMC with the gold star at the Magic Circle.
Do you know what's wonderful about opportunities? I've made more friends tonight. So that's
wonderful, John. Yeah, that's great. Okay, I think Asha wanted to jump in.
First of all, I think Dan Harlan should get a medal for his Tarbell work from somebody.
Probably like a Purple Heart.
There you go. Something. I was curious about what you thought about Harry Lorraine specifically, his Memory Palace work, that sort of thing.
Okay. Oh man, I could talk for another hour. So I'll give you Cliff Notes version. Harry and I had a very interesting relationship, and thankfully it ended in, I think, a really, really beautiful place. When the memory arts first came out, he was not at all happy that I did not mention him in the book, and was very publicly upset with. I finally had to kind of have a conversation with him, and thankfully a mutual friend put us together. And this was after several years. It was towards the end of his life, and I'm so glad that we got the chance to talk. So the truth is, and I will tell you exactly what I told Harry at the beginning of that conversation. So first of all, it went like this. I called him, he called me, I don't remember. One of us answered, and Harry, and he said, SarahElla. And I said, Harry, SarahElla. Like we both were kind of waiting, like, where's this going to go? So when I first discovered mnemonics, it was in Corinda, or was reminded by mnemonics. Corinda recommended, I believe, Feinagel. Feinagel recommended, basically, I ended up going all the way back to Plato and Aristotle. And I read every single book on mnemonics that I could find, all the way up to the 1900s and some from that era as well. And by the time that I got to read Harry's book, I read the first chapter and I stopped there. Not that I disagreed with what he was teaching or anything. It was just what I had read in all of the other books. And I had heard so much about him as as a memory expert and a mnemonist, that I was hoping or was interested to know what he wrote and what he said. And I found out, I read enough to know, okay, this is the same stuff regurgitated. No, yeah, regurgitated. And so for that reason, I did not mention him. But I got to thinking about it, and I did, I think, do him a great disservice in not talking about him in my book. While I didn't learn any new techniques from him, and so I didn't talk about him as one of the innovators of the art in the book. He did something that no one else had done before, or at least not maybe since Finagle. Finagle, I think, was like late 1400s. He was kind of a Harry Lorraine of his day. He got the public interested in the art of memory in a way that it never had before. And all of a sudden, this type of magical performance was in the public view, and no one did it better than him. As far as knowing how to sell the art of memory, he was the best. And he was brilliant in bringing in, for his memory book, bringing in, is it Jerry Luca, the basketball star, and knowing that people maybe don't know who I am as a magician, but they're going to know who this guy is. Bringing him into that book was brilliant and really, really a smart thing. And the truth is, I mentioned that I was reminded by mnemonics by Corinda. I was taught mnemonics as a kid by my dad, and my dad learned mnemonics by reading that book by Harry Lorraine. Wow. So really, I should have talked about the fact that, he got the world paying attention to these systems that have been around for hundreds of years. And no, maybe he didn't invent any new system that wasn't already invented, but he presented it in a way that got people to care. And that is so, so important. And so for that reason, I 100% should have talked about him. And I appreciate his contribution because of that. And I'm happy to say that we ended the conversation as friends. We began it as staunch enemies and ended as friends. And it was we ended up talking for several hours, and it was just so fun. And I got to see some things that he shared with me privately and personally that I would never share. But I got to see a side of him that I think a lot of people didn't get to see. And he answered very honestly for me some questions that I had always had. And it's kind of one of the highlights of my life. I'm so glad that my friend put us in touch and we got to have that conversation.
Thank you, Asher. Paul Abbey, switch your mic on, Paul, and jump on in.
Good evening, everybody. Hello, SarahElla. Thank you for this wonderful chat this evening. This is fantastic. And I've got to kind of express again what John has said, my dear friend John here. And it's funny you talk about mental health and well-being. I worked in local government for a while, and I was a well-being ambassador. And when I came on here, just got to say thank you to Anthony again, as John did,
very welcome.
for inviting me on. It's really made me smile. It's given me my energy back. And it's fantastic the way magic brings us all together like this. Now, I sometimes say, and Anthony will tell me off for this, but I feel like a fraud because I call myself an actor first. I'm actually an actor. And this actually came up on one of Anthony's posts just a short while ago. I just want to mention this, Sarah, because I said to him in the post, in a reply, that had I not been an actor and I'd not gone to drama school, I never would have been a professional magician, ever. It taught me so much. But over the years, and because I teach and I study Tai Chi, and I also teach magic at a London college, and one of the things that there's really been in the thread with this all the way through is about storytelling and what I believe to be the energy. If you don't get up on the stage and you don't have the energy, you're stuffed before you even start. And one of these things that I've noticed, this was very interesting in the conversation, is about building the story. But what I see a lot of the time with a lot of entertainers is this, what I call the void. And it's awful. It's where a magician will start off with something, and then there's this awful quietness while they're meddling about and fiddling about with things. And I think to myself, speak, say something, just talk. And it's not just about patter. It's about building a story, building a script, having a basic script. And so this, what you've done, Sarah, and just being in everybody else's company tonight has just fired me up again. So,
Wonderful.
That's really cool. Now, I got to ask you something. So my main question for you, Sarah, is you've said that this mnemonics thing goes back hundreds of years. Is that right? It's not just a recent thing.
Oh, yes. It is. So in kind of the Western literature, it's kind of attributed to Simonides, who was from like the time of like Plato, Aristotle, before them. So very, very ancient. However, even those records are not correct. The truth is that mnemonics can be found across the globe and across cultures, in every single culture that anthropologists have studied. And there's learning over time. While we're recommending books, Dr. Lynn Kelly is a dear friend of mine out of Australia, and she has written a whole bunch of wonderful. Anything by her on mnemonics is incredible. The Memory Code, just excellent books. She started kind of having these realizations about even things, monuments like Stonehenge or the cairns in southern France, that those are mnemonic tools. And this idea that what we've thought of as the shaman and the mystic men of these like nomadic cultures isn't necessarily, I think it's easy in modern day to write them off and just think like, oh yeah, that was just their weird religion of the day or whatever. But no, these were the knowledge, like the knowledge men. They were the ones that knew everything that their tribe or their group of people needed to know to live in that environment. And then especially when people groups were nomadic, they had memory palaces. They created these mnemonic worlds based on the locations that they would travel as they traversed the land. So even if you look back in like the Aboriginal, like their current culture, and that's one of the things that makes Lynn's work so incredible, is that she's made these connections with these indigenous people who've lifted the veil for her a little bit. She actually got her start as her doctorate was in studying arachnids, spiders. And there was, when they were putting together an encyclopedia of all of the spider species and insect species of Australia, they went to an Aboriginal shaman or leader. I hesitate to, I want to make sure I'm giving him the correct title, and I'm probably not, but one of the leaders of these Aboriginal group. And he, for the people, and this is a documented book to this day, told them every single species of insect in Australia, thousands of species. Not only did he tell them, they had them and organized them and already done what we think of as like modern science. This was knowledge that had been passed down for thousands and thousands and thousands of years through mnemonics. So really, mnemonics, I believe, have been around for as long as we have been able to communicate with each other, and maybe even before then, because and that's why they work, is they're inherent to our biology, the way that our brains developed, and the way that we take in the world.
So is this, have you written, I'm sorry to be ignorant because of this first time we've met. So have you written any books that I can study on?
So the Memory Arts.
Oh my Lord. Right. Okay.
And that is available on Vanishing and other websites, but I really love it if you get it from themystictower.com. So my and Dan's website.
It's my understanding, I'm not sure if this is superior form of memory or memorization, but song, like the alphabet song you learn when you're a kid. So
that was literally my honors thesis for when I was in school. And I presented it at APA, the American Psychological Association in Denver, Colorado. last summer. So I love that you're asking this question. So there's been the scientific literature is not conclusive. And as far as does this work? However, my thesis, what I presented at APA, and what I'm going to tell you today is that the reason for that is that those studies were not done properly. If you think about, I know for me, if you ask me what letter comes after M, I'm going to sing that chunk of the alphabet song in my head. I cannot tell you, well, and that was an easy one. But in general, I'm not going to know unless I sing that song. There is so much knowledge when we are kids that we learn through song that sticks with us to this day. And if you think about, it's a fact that our advertisers and our corporations know to be true. It's why they create jingles stuck in your head. Now, the reason that I think that the literature doesn't necessarily support what we know to be true based on daily life and what we see and what is accepted by, multi-million and billion-dollar industries that are, putting jingles out into the world is that they created songs in their studies for mnemonics that weren't well written. And I was looking at, and I would, not just, I'd read the article and I'd be like, okay, well, let me see the song. And usually they include them in an appendix in the back. And I'm looking at the music and I'm like, this is awful. It's literally like a random, they just kind of threw notes on the page. Unfortunately, we see this happen not just with music, but with magic as well. There's a real gap, I think, in psychological literature. It's closing. There are people that are working in this space to fix this problem, but they'll do studies with magic. And there was one that I read, and they literally found their neighbor was an amateur magician and asked their neighbor to perform cups and balls for this science. And then the paper was published by an amateur magician instead of finding someone that really was a master of cups and balls. And that's the same kind of problem. And so the results were that, magic can't do this thing that they were trying to find. Well, no, you didn't have a magician perform the magic. Therefore, that's why that didn't work. Same thing with what these studies were finding with music was that they weren't getting musicians to write music. True composers that know how to use music as a tool. So I put together, trying to think, it's been a little while now, a well-composed, I used Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So a well-composed, known
Which
melody.
is the ABC.
Which is also, ABCD is to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, that melody. So I used that melody. I then poorly composed Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So the chords that I played with it were wrong. I did weird things with how the words fell with the music, that they were disjointed. I then composed myself along, because I was also a music major, along with several of our composition faculty. I would compose a song, but then get their feedback. A new melody that was very similar to Twinkle, Twinkle, Star in length and just the key signature, time signature, similar. And then a novel, awful melody. And I put a list of random words to that and had, I believe it ended up being like over 120 people listen to those different songs. Each person was in a different group. And then they had to write down the words that they remembered. And then I came back a week later and had them recall those words that they learned in the song. And sure enough, the poorly composed songs. Oh, and then I had a group that I just read the words to at about the same pace as they were presented in the song. Sure enough, the people with the poorly composed music, they learned it worse than the people that just heard it spoken. Those that had good composition, it made a difference. It helped them learn. Really long way to you tapped into another one of my passions to say that yes, music absolutely helps. I think because it also taps into that emotion, and it's all about finding ways to connect information and knowledge to things that we know, or in other ways that we can hold on to other than just facts.
Well, you're so right on this, because we touched on it earlier, the pace in music, which helps us. And nobody goes up to a 2 or 3-year-old. I don't have any grandchildren, but I have grandnephews and nieces. And not that long ago, she was 2.5 years old. My grandniece was here, and she was just doing things. And I dare say, in the next 20 years or whatever, she will remember them. And we all do this. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, or the alphabet song, or whatever. Now, I hate to do this, but we've come up to almost 2 hours. Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead,
look,
please.
No matter how long you spend with SarahElla, it is never long enough to get all of the knowledge. So I highly recommend, if anybody wants to follow up on mnemonics, on storytelling, on anything having to do with magic or psychology or anything like that, schedule a consultation with her. You can do it through our website. I just have to mention that because it will be some of the best investment that you've ever made in whatever your questions are for magic. I get it for free, but I recommend that you do that. At the very least, spend more time finding out what she knows, because she's absolutely incredible. So that's it. I just wanted to say that. I got to run.
You've got a great future, Dan, as a mind reader, because I was going to say pretty much the same thing.
Awesome.
Just need to say a huge thank you, obviously, to Dan, and even more obviously to all of you being here, and to dear SarahElla, who, I pointed out earlier on, we could sit here and talk till Christmas 2027 and probably not cover everything, as you're finding out in the chat, and so on. So basically, huge thank you for her, for making the time to schedule all this. And yes, please, as Janice suggested, go to themystictower.com, SarahElla on Harlan on Facebook, and any other social media. And if you want to, you're very, very welcome. The Association de Magiciens Internationaux. If you do that on Facebook, it'll come up, and it's a private Facebook group. And as of fairly recently, I'm delighted to welcome SarahElla as a certified AMI member. Anyway, before we wind up, let me just go to John again, because he's been sitting patiently with his hand raised. Yes, John.
No, it was just an aspect on storytelling there. You can tell by the name O'Riordan that I'm from Ireland originally, and I grew up with parents that could tell great stories around firesides, and in Ireland, the culture was called a rambling house, and the entertainment would be storytellers would go from house to house and tell stories. They didn't have to do any magic, but it was very creative and very magical. And if you can link your magic into storytelling while you're doing something, it just does enhance it. And I just wanted to reinforce the storytelling aspect of magic. That's what I
Absolutely, John. Well done. As we mentioned earlier on in passing, but it's there, the Celtic cultures, the Aboriginal cultures, pretty much indigenous people all over. I mean, my own background, as some of you know already, DNA, is, sitting around a fire with Native American things, and, learning there. It could be anything from medicine to, what plants to pluck, stories. And sometimes those stories would be sung to a drum or a flute, and you retain it. I mean, at my age, you can wake me up at 3 a.m. and say, "What about that and that and that you learned when you were 6 or 5?" And it'll come back. It'll come back.
That was the important part about it. The association, you never forgot. Going back to the culture that I had as a young child, and my parents were very humble, but they could sit and hold an audience with just a simple story, and that to me was magic,
Well, Well, let me do this, kind of bring everything to a close by thanking Dan and mostly
Thank you,
Sarah
Dan.
Ellen as
Thank
a
you,
guest.
Sarah.
Thank you very much, and to everybody that's here.